What's up, everybody? Bigz from the Undroppables here to tell you a little bit about Underdog Fantasy. Now, the 2023 NFL season is over, but fantasy football season never stops. You can already draft for the 2024 season over on Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to play fantasy football. The Big Board is a pre-NFL draft fantasy football contest with all of the incoming rookies in the players pool. All of them. You draft your team in 20 rounds, and that's it. You set it and forget it. There's no lineup management. In best ball, you get the optimal score to fill your starting lineup. It's a great way to get your dynasty startup draft fix without any league management whatsoever. It's only $10 to enter, and there's over $2 million in prizes that are up for grabs. How much of that $2 million do you want? Now go over to Underdog Fantasy and be sure to sign up with the code Undroppable. It's right down there. You'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. You put in $100 and you start with $200. Download the app today, get started, and I hope you win. Okay. Sorry about that. No and we're problem. Back with Kraig Reuth. And Kraig Reuth is the creative director at RotoHeat.com. I appreciate you coming in. I want to give a shout out to Chalk. He's our fearless leader over at the Undroppables. Bradley Stalder, heading up Fantasy Football Plus, home of the Dynasty Pulse. Shout out Mike Lindbergh, Grindberg, aka at Fantasy or FF Canuck 99. I know your name, Mike. My partner in crime, partner in everything, Dukes and Travis over at the Undroppables, doing all the graphic content. You guys are awesome. You make everything work, and we appreciate you and all your hard work. All right, let's finish this up. This is part 3, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, go over to the Fantasy Burn. You can watch the whole video, this whole thing with Kraig and I. Go to the Dynasty Pulse over on Fantasy Football Plus on YouTube, and you can see the Dynasty Pulse show. And then over here on the Undroppables, you're already watching it already, or you're at the Fantasy Burn. Go over to the Undroppables, and this is our Undroppables, my Undroppables Devy content. We're here talking about quarterbacks. We'll make this super quick and get Kraig out of here. Basically, we're talking about the evolution of the quarterback position in NFL. The fact that everything is win now. You got guys who are being drafted in the top 5 who aren't ready to do it. Then they get crapped on because they're not ready to do it, so they don't do it. And then sometimes they can resurrect their careers. Sometimes they can completely fall off the map. It's not like it used to be where a guy gets drafted, holds a clipboard for 3 or 4 years, and then can recover or blossom as a viable guy. There's another trend, and that's affecting college football, and that's the NIL. So there's a specific quarterback that I have in mind that I love. He's been a target of mine for the last 3 years. Was the quarterback at the University of Arkansas. I'm talking about KJ Jefferson. Watching him in some games last year, he reminded me a lot of Anthony Richardson, just without the age and the arm talent. But watching that guy tuck the ball and absolutely truck linebackers down the field, the rushing upside was there for him to be a big dude in the rushing game in fantasy. And he didn't have the arm talent to be a first rounder. He transferred as a 5th-year senior to go spend his 6th year. Like, what are you doing? You're losing all of your upside at South Carolina. It's got to be an NIL thing. We see it at the running back position. Travion Henderson could have been the RB1 in this draft class. He goes back to Ohio State. Raheem Sanders from Arkansas, he was a top 5 running back until he got hurt last year. And then instead of kind of working his way back and entering the draft this year as a young declare, he's going back and continuing his career too. The contract situation in the NFL is a little bit different with running backs than it is for quarterbacks. The running backs are disincentivized from entering. But how do you see the quarterback position in college football? Are guys going to be staying for their 5th and 6th years unless they're just getting that Caleb Williams steam? Is that where we're going to see from now on?
Unless people are sure of themselves, one, and then two, their draft position, I think you are going to be seeing it. He's a great example of he's going to be making more, I'm guessing, off the NIL than he would as a rookie in the NFL where he would have been drafted. And for a lot of these guys, quarterbacks are always important. You're going to be having guys drafted late that are still going to be making teams in practice squads. So they're going to have opportunities to make a team down the road. They aren't losing that. Are they losing the potential high end on the back end? Of course, because age catches up with everyone. And even if you're Tom Brady, we learned. So he's having to make that sort of balancing act in his mind of what can I make now, college versus NFL, versus what do I think my realistic prospects are down the road. It's not to say I don't think he doesn't believe in himself, but everyone's situation is different in terms of their family life, what that money can mean for them now, what can mean for their family now, and then comparing that. I think that is a real conversation you're seeing in real time. People aren't talking it out necessarily in the public, but you're seeing the results of those conversations they're having with themselves and their choices that they're making. You're seeing a lot more quarterbacks and then just players in general making that choice, because it always used to be, man, if you thought you were going to be drafted in the first 3 rounds or something, you just went because you wanted to get that money to secure it for yourselves. And it's a very different league now with that happening. And then for the NFL, we talked about with a lot of quarterbacks, this is one of those groups where a lot of these guys are older, and I think you're going to continue to see older guys come into the NFL, and teams are going to have to adapt to, all right, what does this mean for our team and our rookies? They might be more polished because they played more, but it's still a steep learning curve, even if you're going from Alabama to the NFL.
Right. Well, I do have an example that hits close to home. Aiden O'Connell was drafted last year in the 4th round by the Las Vegas Raiders. He was a 4th round pick, and he was 24. He had been at Purdue for a while, and he was fairly polished when he came into the league. He had as far as the rookies were concerned, the rookies that played last year, he was second to CJ Stroud in DVOA and a whole bunch of metrics. He had the second best rookie season of the rookie class in 2023, which nobody saw coming. He was better than Will Levis. He was better than Bryce Young. He was better than everybody. He was older than all those guys as well. So in talking about NFL evolution of the quarterback position and the fact that it's guys get better as they age, might this be better for our dynasty quarterbacks if they're spending a longer period of time in college? Doesn't it kind of mimic that old school hold a clipboard for 3 years aspect of it? So you get a guy with like Bo Nix who has so many thousands of reps now because he's been in the league for 6 years. Spencer Rattler, same thing. That's changing. So how does that affect Devy? Is it better to kind of ignore an Arch Manning in your Devy drafts and Devy trades? Is it better to go grab a KJ Jefferson who does have that experience? How does that affect what you're doing in Devy?
I think it really matters on the prospect that you're looking at. If you have what you believe in, the word is thrown around too much, but I'm using it because that's what gets used, generational prospect, which some people called Arch Manning. I don't know that he was. You're not going to know for a while, but he was the next big thing for quarterbacks in Devy for a while. They're coming out of high school. You didn't see a whole lot last year for a variety of reasons, and everyone's blowing up now because of the orange-white game that they just played this past weekend and how great he looked. If you're a firm believer that he's going to be the next thing and you can get him in Devy, go get him, because it'll probably matter quicker for your NFL squad if you're going to be right. But I think and it matters more for C2C leagues, I guess, but if you're playing in one of those crazy leagues, you can hang on to some of these quarterbacks for longer, where it actually matters on that side of the ball for you more and gives them more opportunities to matter, where some of these guys that are going to be great in C2C for longer for you probably aren't going to do much of anything at the NFL level. But if you're talking pure Devy, you really do have to weigh whether or not you think this is going to be one of the next starting quarterbacks in the NFL, or if what you're seeing leads you to believe, all right, it's not panning out like Keaton Slovis, for example. It started off fantastic for him, and it's just gone downhill since. Probably someone you should have just moved off of, if you didn't believe in him when you started seeing it, because at this point, it's a sunk cost for you. You're stuck with whatever you have because he's probably not going to be an NFL starter.
Right. So I will say one thing about Arch Manning. I watched him in a game in high school, and he was being rushed from the blind side. He started moving to his left, and he threw a sidearm, off platform, off balance throw. While he's moving to his left, he threw the ball to his right and put it right on the tight end's hands, who was running a crossing pattern in the end zone. And the first thing I said, like, it was one of those moments where brain and mouth meet and without thought, and I just blurted out, Patrick Mahomes. It was the most Patrick Mahomes throw I've ever seen, and he was 16 years old. So mechanically, instinctively, he was the real deal. And all I wanted was for him to go to LSU. I wanted him to stay in state. And with Uncle going to Dad going to Mississippi State, or Ole Miss, Uncle going to Ole Miss, and other uncle going to Tennessee. I thought staying in state and going to LSU would have been the perfect thing. He could have just gone straight to Baton Rouge and been the absolute king of Louisiana. I was kind of disappointed when he went to Texas, and even more disappointed when Quinn Ewers decided to go back this year. I can't wait for the Arch Manning breakout. Obviously, he's a young kid. He's still a couple years away from figuring out what he's going to do. Anybody else that you're watching? Drew Aller, Jackson Dart. Who are the guys that kind of people should be targeting in their startup drafts in Devy and C2C? Who gets you excited at the quarterback position in college this year?
I do like Quinn Ewers, and I think he's probably going to be one of, if not the top quarterback for the next year's draft. He's banking on going back and basically having slightly improved, but a repeat performance of the second half of the year. I mean, some of his statistics last year were just phenomenal in terms of, like I saw, and I don't remember where it was. He had I think it might have been PFF. He had like a 76% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns and no interceptions in fourth quarters last year. That's the sort of, when it matters stats.
In the SEC.
Texas became the first non-conference opponent to beat Alabama at home. I think it was in 16 years or something like that. That's the sort of stuff that really ends up mattering. And if you can build on it, set yourself up, not only for a Heisman, but set yourself up for the NFL level and being that number 1 overall pick or that high end pick. But another guy, just the way there's another name out there that isn't as big, Connor Wegman for Texas A&M. Yeah, I'm staying in Texas, but he was having a really nice year before he got hurt, and it ended up being out for the year with a foot injury. In like 3.5 games, he had almost 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, about a 69% completion percentage. And he was another guy that there was a lot of hype for, and because of injury, you just didn't get to see it. So he's a guy that I'm liking that you can probably still get later in drafts. And certainly if he starts building on that year that he started with last year, he's going to be another name that's right there if he decides to come out next year. Okay.
So, putting your prognostication cap on real quick, give me the top 3 2025 quarterbacks drafted. You have to sift through who's going to stay.
Yeah.
It's a 5th-year guy who's going to come out as a junior declare. You have to sift through all that. There's a 3-year window of possibilities, guys returning and stuff like that. But if you had to say today, who are the top 3 drafted quarterbacks in 2025?
Well, I got to put Quinn Ewers up there as my top guy, just from what I've seen out of him and been impressed with, and some of the other issues with some of these guys. I really don't want to put Drew Aller up there.
Right.
Just so I guess I won't. I'm still gonna go with him. Cade Klubnik. I think he showed enough, just a bad year last year in terms of resiliency and able to do stuff where if Clemson has any hope of continuing what they once were, they got to turn this around even more. And I think they're going to put him in a position to do it. He was another younger guy that had all the tools that came and supplanted a guy that still sticking around. DJU, I believe, is at Oregon State this year. He's somewhere still. You talk about guys that have been around forever. I'll put Cade up there, and then the third one, it's such a crapshoot because, like you mentioned earlier, I don't think this is a very good quarterback draft class. There's always going to be someone that'll surprise and this and that.
Right.
I think a guy that has a real shot to it, Jalen Milroe, with what we saw out of him, he's not in this draft, is he? I think he went back.
Yeah, he might come out in 2025 or 2026.
Well, I'm going to throw him in there because Alabama's
okay.
Still like a quarterback factory, and if they can get guys out of there that do great, they want to do that. And I think he's another guy that just showed a ton of progress last year for a guy that people had given up on, even earlier in that season, when they were playing a little bit of that quarterback roulette at Alabama in those early games. But he really showed out later on in the season for him, and I like the growth that he showed.
Do you see anything from Ugalele or Tungavaloa?
I mean, DJU was such a big name. He was a guy that I drafted early in Devy drafts way back after Trevor Lawrence. When he was coming out, he was the next guy there. I don't think he's really going to be anything at the NFL level. He could end up being a backup, but he's not anything one I'd ever count on as a starter. And same thing with Tua's brother, Taluya. I can never pronounce his name, but it's something like that. He just hasn't done what I'd want for someone playing at, Maryland.
Right.
The Big Ten isn't the SEC or something like that. And there should be more games where you're seeing more that you like out of him. So yeah, he probably gets drafted, but I don't, again, see anything long-term out of him as far as NFL being able to come in and be a starter.
All right. Now, I thank you for your time today. I know that it's lunchtime in Wisconsin, and I hate to be that guy, but I know the cheese curds are calling. Ha ha ha! Isn't that funny? All right. So I'm going to get you out of here, but I want to get your thoughts on my big sleeper, the guy that I'm targeting in every trade that I make, every startup draft that I'm doing in Devy and C2C and NCAA leagues. Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht. He's a sophomore. What do you think of him?
To be honest, I know very little out of him. I've seen his name, and I haven't really done a whole lot of quarterback deep diving into this year for these younger guys. And part of the reason is because of what you mentioned earlier, that there's so many of these guys that you start studying now, and then in 3 years, they're still going to be in college, and they've changed what they are in quarterbacks for better or worse. So when it comes to that more fantasy relevant time for NFL leagues, what you're looking at now isn't the same thing. And sadly, I'm not in any deep Devy leagues. My C2C league that I was in folded, and one of my other deeper Devy leagues folded. I'm in 2 Devy leagues now, which is fine. And they have IDP in them, which I love. But I haven't done that far into a lot of the younger quarterbacks.
Well, that is a fantastic answer. And the reason that answer is so fantastic is because everybody, including you, need to go to the Undroppables and go to the Unveiled. That is my Devy column where you can read who my top 10 targets are, who my top 10 fades are. Rocco Becht is my number 1 target. He came out, earned the starting job as a freshman, had a huge bowl game, 400 yards, something like that, 4 touchdowns. He had a freshman breakout at Iowa State, which produced Brock Purdy. Iowa State isn't a slouch. And Rocco Becht is a dude. He's a dude. So everybody go check out my Unveiled articles. Now that we're through the spring practices and the intra-squad games and stuff like that, the Devy content is going to be coming fast and furious, and I'm going to be updating that column weekly. So everybody check that out. Thank you, Kraig Reuth. let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Roto Heat Kraig. It's Kraig with a K because my parents had to make my life difficult, or unique if you ask them. But either way, that's how you spell that. And all my content right now is over at rotoheat.com. Again, it's sort of a transition period for us, but we got rankings up over there. Articles are going to be coming out more frequently after the draft here. So you can find it all over there.
You have a kindred spirit in former New York Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles, whose parents spelled his name Graig, not Greg like everybody else.
I get Greg called Nettles. Greg all the time, so
he was very famous. If you're an old, all right, everybody, thank you for watching the Undroppables. This is the unveiled portion of my episode of the series. We've got Chalk coming up doing wide receivers. Go back and watch the Noah Hills episode on running backs. Go back and watch the Andrew Cooper episode on tight ends, just to get yourself ready for the rookie drafts that are going to be starting up after the NFL draft on Thursday. And of course, go to the Undroppables YouTube page on Thursday night at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern to watch all of us at the Undroppables come in and out, get drunk, react to our teams and what their first round picks are going to be. Go over to the Fantasy Burn, watch this entire thing. Go to the Dynasty Pulse to see the Dynasty portion with Kraig Reuth. And of course, I hope you all win.